would never do that again. Ketosis.
What blood type are you, by the way?
A positive.
I bet because I'm O positive. My sister had done some like forensic anthropology study. She says O positive. A lot of that goes back to hunter-gatherers, where a survival trait was your ability to store. Because if I skip 4 hours, 5 hours of eating and I eat something, I'm very efficient at storing it. Your body kind of goes into that starvation panic easier.
Right.
And she was saying that certain blood types generally, nothing's cut and dry, generally have certain, propensities for more efficiency in doing certain things. And so for me, this works perfect because I never get into that starvation panic mode and I just stay living on the fat. And then that's what does it. Because otherwise I've done 5-day fasts, nothing for 5 days. But when I would come off the fast, I would actually gain weight. I would because my body's like, okay, we got to hold this. There's a famine.
Yeah,
We
sure.
got to make sure we're ready. And I don't lose energy when I'm fasting because it's so efficient at burning the energy. It's like, I am a hunter-gatherer. Damn it.
That's funny. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And I don't know, is it just me, Robert, or like when Tim goes on rabbit trails like that, I am just waiting for him to say something inappropriate. I just, like I'm cringing inside, like, what's he going to say? What's he going to say? Somebody's got your audio on. I hear something.
No, it was me. I'm turning it on just so I can see what everybody else sees.
Yes.
Oh, boy.
I saw from that smile, Rob knows what I'm talking about.
I never say anything inappropriate.
Why do I think you said
inappropriate?
You said "and" appropriate? Yes, you never say anything appropriate. I agree with that, Tim. Just slap an NC-17 on the stream. Yeah, I'm not even sure the NC-17 will cover some of the stuff that Tim says. It's not so much the rating.
That is bogus. Flag on the play.
Flag on the play. Oh, boy. Here we go. We're going to strap in. You're always up for a good time when you've got Tim on. We are going to be seen and heard in 3, 2, and 1. Welcome to Blue Box, and thank you for joining us today. This is Loremaster Arcanum 111. What? 11 years old. You get the 3 ones tonight, Tim. We are with the ever mysterious Tim, creator of the gorgeous crit tables, one of 2 sets we use here on Blue Box, but also so much more than that. A longtime player with Jay, Lord Gazumba, also runs the Barbarian campaigns, including the Underdogs that I get to play in a few times a year. And also just a generally fun guy, great role player, great DM, member of the community. Tim, welcome as always.
Thank you very much for having me.
And then
Let's not forget the reverse dungeon here.
Oh yes, and the reverse dungeon.
No,
Yes,
we cannot forget the reverse dungeon.
Oh, it's fun.
Goblins go wild,
and you can see the GGW, also the HGW. He's a hobgoblin there in the armor that he's wearing, and the title of tonight's show is Better Death with the ever mysterious Tim. And I thought about all kinds of fancy titles, Rob, and alliteration, and I thought, you know what is better for Tim than just the expertise of creating death on characters in games, and so I thought that was a fun title for Tim. Tonight, we're going to talk about a variety of subjects in D&D combat, and we're going to take some real-world examples. And one of the major themes, I'll say this probably 3 to 4 times tonight, which is that themes that we'll talk about tonight are not intended to translate to a tabletop RPG game in a cumbersome mechanic. I don't want to add layers of charts and turn this into a war game. They're more ideas for DMs and players to keep in mind. And yes, I could see some, as I talked with Robert about this, some CNC style spot rulings. I would have no problem as a DM in a certain set of circumstances saying, hey, add +1 to your damage based on this, or add +2 to your damage based on that, or morale checks that need to be made being influenced by some of the topics that we'll talk about tonight. So it should be a really fun discussion, and we're going to talk about the book Monsters Know What They're Doing and all the supplements that have come out from that. That's a fun subject. And then we're going to talk about when monsters don't know what they're doing and reasons they might not be as clever as you might think in normal situations. As always, I have with me my lovely co-host, Robert. Good to have you with us tonight, and hope you've had a good week. And we're buzzing from last night's Greyhawk Awakening and all the announcements. If you missed it, obviously we have some player changes. One, which is fairly short term, a few months. Vivi has a new job, and we are excited for her. She's been wanting a new job for a long time. So there is rejoicing in Vivi land over that.
Yay.
But also tears, because she's going to have to work Monday nights, Tuesday nights, and Friday nights now. So she will not be in Greyhawk Awakening for probably the next 5 months or so. And so we're hoping to see her come back in fall. But in the interim, we have new players that are joining as well. And then the other one was Hob. Hob will not be with us. And that could be a more extended period of time. Hob has a crazy work schedule right now. And fortunately, some of that is coming from her sponsorship with Blue Box. She's gotten more and more artwork. People have seen what she's doing, including now a relationship that she has with Troll Lord Games. She's doing some stuff for some of their products as we speak. And so she will not be with us for a while. So the two new players that we've added, we talked about last night. And I'll just go over these announcements, and then we'll jump right into our subjects. But the first, of course, if you were with us last night, you already saw this. We have Dollar Store DM Ashlyn joining us in the Greyhawk Awakening crew. And again today, peppered me with some fantastic ideas. The character that she's running for Book 3 is really cool. Lots of lore. She's going to be a really great addition to the GHA crew. And then the big surprise for everyone, Manda, Mystical Unicorn, joining us. And I believe it was Fraley was the first one. I did just call Rob my Vanna White. That's exactly right. There are worse comparisons to be made, right, Rob?
Listen, can I get Vanna's money? I mean,
Yeah, no kidding. But I think it was Fraley, Patrick, who was the first one that texted me and said, how on earth did you get Manda or convince Manda to come on stream? And honestly, I didn't. She volunteered, and we are super excited. She's brilliant, funny, great role player, backbone of the community, beloved by all. And so excited to have Manda joining us. She's already got her character concept. She also has been pinging me all day for lore and information, getting ready for her character. She's super excited. We'll talk about some of the other guests that we have coming up and other things going on this month in Blue Box Land. But let's go ahead and jump into tonight's topic. So, Tim, we joke a lot about you, and I've got a shirt that says "Don't blame me, Tim made me do it." I didn't wear that one tonight, but
Blame and recrimination.
Yes, but everyone sees the weapons behind you. Those weapons are real. That's not a fake background that he has behind him.
It's virtual.
It's not virtual. Those are very real. But for those that don't know you, we've got newer members of the community as well. For those that don't know you, Tim, talk a little bit about your background, your time, high level time in the military, and some of the things that have influenced you. You played D&D for 40 years, but you have outside influences that have changed how you look at D&D and combat in particular.
Yes, I've had a career in the military, served for just under 22 years, retired, and I was infantry for 2.5 years, and then I was in logistics. I was an officer, did a lot of stuff. Didn't do anything super cool, but I had friends who did some really super cool stuff that I can't talk about.
Okay.
But I wasn't super cool. It was just regular cool. And just preparing as a soldier, preparing to go into combat. You're preparing for it. Gave me insights into what it takes to actually get prepared for it. And of course, you're never 100% prepared because every person can be different, but there's a lot of things that are uniform that work when they're done properly. And that's sort of what I try to overlay onto D&D. That's why any group that's chaotic evil, they never are going to hold together. They might be good at something, but they're never going to hold something cohesively together over a period of time.
Okay. Well, no, and that's a great place for us to start. And so I've got up here the website for Monsters Know What They're Doing. It's a fun book. People have talked about it quite a bit. Robert, you've read this, correct?
Yeah, I've read it, and not all of it, but I've read a good portion of it. But it brings up some interesting things to think about.
So why don't we start there, and then we'll dovetail off of that. So, Rob, I'll put you on the spot here for a second. Just give me an example, even if it's not specifically from the book, but conceptually some of the things that you think. Mike, you've read it. And by the way, oh, yes, I should come back and mention, thank you, Joffrey. I've said this to you before, Tim, but thank you for your service. And we all...
I was just responding to somebody. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, we do.
I stayed in until it wasn't fun anymore, and then I retired.
Okay, all right. I'm not going to ask any more on that. Sorry, Rob. So concepts from this in terms of how you like to see your game implemented, where you do put some, let's put some, the CRPG equivalent of good AI behind your monsters.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things you kind of touched on it already in talking about, Tim was talking about chaotic evil, and this actually, it's one of the things that really becomes important, especially with low level, because what's one of the complaints about low levels? Feeling that you're fighting the same, if you're fighting mobs, you're probably fighting the same mobs over and over again every time you do another low level campaign, at least for the first couple of levels, but they all start to feel the same, but they shouldn't. Because, like even in 5e, where alignment is kind of, they still, you note that if you look at goblins, kobolds, and orcs, there's 3 different variations on evil. One's chaotic, one's lawful, one's neutral evil. And they're going to act in different ways. There's going to be more order, to the lawful evil, there'll be more order to it. So you have to figure out how that impacts how they're going to fight. At what point are they going to say, this isn't worth our lives and we're just getting the hell out of here? What's their morale going to look like? And also taking into impact their intelligence levels. Are they bright? Are they not so bright? Are they more primal creatures versus intelligent? Because all these things are going to have an impact on what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, and, how long they're going to be willing to stand in if they're getting their butts kicked.
Yeah. I like to also think about how long, for a humanoid, let's say the reverse dungeon, how long have they been there? The goblins, how long have they been there? How many years? What threats have opposed them? How undisciplined or lazy are they? Because at the start of it, the boss was lazy. They didn't even have guards during daylight hours because everybody was sleeping. So they were really undisciplined and lazy, which is actually quite normal. It's normal to eventually, erode into indiscipline unless there's somebody, making people do the things that keep you protected. And why would they if no one's been coming there and bothering them for 10, 15, 20 years, which is, pretty good long life for a goblin. Or are they close to dwarves that have been doing, coming in routinely? So now they've seen what happens when you're not ready, and now they have traps, and they have even pits are a big pain. A pit is a terrible nuisance, and that's why castles had moats. All right, and
you're jumping ahead. So we're going to talk about terrain as well. So part of this is corralling the Timness of Tim. So you got morale, Rob. That was a kind of a key point that you talked about, and other elements. If you look at the sort of initial statements here on their site, let me pull this back up. Every creature wants first and foremost to survive. If it's seriously wounded, by definition, 40% of its maximum hit points, you may prefer a different threshold. It will try to flee. So this goes to morale and running. Robert brings the point up of even at first level, and I would argue there are a multitude of different types of enemies you can throw at first level characters, even in hordes. Beyond, if you just use a little bit of creativity, there's a lot that's out there. And he gave some specific examples of various types of evil. Lawful in nature would be very different than chaotic in nature. You have creatures which can be quite neutral, but would have reasons that they would attack a party, even of good characters. Go ahead.
I think cultures will matter, and then also leadership style, which is where the morale fits in. Because if it's a fear-based leader, as soon as you think that leader is out or not paying attention or whatever, they're going to fold much easier than somebody who is treated and cares about the leader and cares about everybody around them. Even if they're evil, they still care about them, and they know they need to hold together. They're going to be much stronger, much less likely to break, much less likely to flee. And even if they're chaotic, but they really, this is the band, and everyone's their own separate, chaotic evil person. But, culturally, maybe they're, they want to go to Valhalla or wherever their version is. So they're not going to run because there's a lot of chaoticness to how they fight, but they're not going to run because that's counter to their culture. Or if they're just gnolls pillaging raiders, they're going to run away as soon as they think it's going to go sour because they want to live.
Yeah, okay. No, that makes sense. So a couple things that were in chat. One, thank you, Patrick. We appreciate the sub. That's 29 months. Thank you for the follow, Dark Fire 79. And also, Patrick, I like it. Fraley said that with him as DM, his monsters are bumbling idiots. That's fair enough. So with the site here that we've got pulled up, they talk about the wisdom levels, the intelligence levels of the creature. Thank you, Bobakiln. You've got, based on the physical abilities, fighting styles, how low dex, high dex creatures would respond. Creatures with a feature that gives it an advantage or enemy disadvantage will always prefer to use that feature. So using their special abilities. If something can fly, it's probably going to fly. Why is that dragon going to stay on the ground the entire time engaging with your paladin when it can get up in the air and strafe and force the paladin to use a ranged weapon or some other methodology, assuming they lack flight or any. I know there's a million different variables, but just as a basic, using the abilities that they have. Increasing rolls. They give some fifth, alignment matters, which is what you were talking about, Rob. If they're friendly by default, neutral, evil creatures, hostile, lawful, all these will affect how they want to attack. So we have talked about dungeon ecology before, but this really takes it specifically to the combat level. So, Rob, in your game, how might you express the difference between a lawful evil enemy, and let's assume it's a group, versus a chaotic evil enemy?
Well, for like a lawful evil enemy, normally I'll have more of a hierarchy. Like a chaotic evil group, there'll probably be one leader and maybe one or two underlings that are used to keep control over the cannon fodder, as it were. But for lawful evil, I normally have it where there's more maybe not a chain of command, but there's more of a structure to it. They know who's in charge. They know what it is they are and are not supposed to do. They tend to not get in their own way quite as much. Now, that may depend on the intelligence levels to a certain extent, but if there are rules, they're probably going to follow them. Chaotic evil, it's more the strongest rules, probably the smartest, because the smartest will have figured out how to keep from getting stabbed in the back better than the rest of them. But it's more it's smarts plus the ability to pummel any comers into oblivion.
So for either one of you, what would be an example of the type of enemy? Let's assume we're not just talking about NPC humanoid, like humans and elves, but a monster of some kind. A monster which in a group would likely display the highest level of coordination and strategic effort in an attack on a PC group.
Wolves, pack tactics. They'll have their leader. They will do what they need to do to basically exhaust their quarry. They'll run the quarry to ground. They'll choose the attack at their time and choosing, and make sure that they've got the advantage as far as they can tell.
Okay,
they're not. Go ahead.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Finish your thought.
But yeah, it's the idea that there's a coordination there that they'll have that will speak to more of an intelligence in how they do their attacks. It's not going to be they're just going to throw themselves willy nilly at the PCs.
Yeah, I like that. So you brought wolves. That my mind wasn't even going there, but that's a great example. So the pack tactics, that's instinct based, and you said something key. You said they will do what is most advantageous to them based on what they know. And obviously, there are things that a wolf does not know innately that we would assume a sentient creature. They're sentient. A creature at a different level of sentience, a humanoid creature, would. So we have the old
wolves in D&D. They're always. I've seen them run. They're always fighting to the death. I'm like, no animal fights to the death like that unless they're stupid. I mean, it is occasional, but usually
rabid.
They're going to fight until they get dominance or they realize, oh, this is not going right, and they run off. Because if they get injured, they do starve to death, and they're going to not make it. So they don't usually.
Yeah, there's an expenditure of energy rule that they also kind of just innately live by. Kobolds were brought up as an example by Pat. Here's so when I'm talking about strategic stuff, the example of, you always know that it's a good idea in tactics to go for the wizard. The wizard typically has the ability to unleash the most pain on large groups all at once. But that's something that a wolf doesn't know. But a more strategic, sentient humanoid creature does. What would be an example, Tim, for you in your game? What level of enemy beyond, let's say, human enemies would you assume might have that level of tactic, whether that's using subterfuge, disguise, attacking vulnerable, or high-power targets first?
Any of those humanoids we've already talked about who have been veterans of running into something and then later become in charge would always have shoot the match rules if they had experienced that before. They were at some battle where half the tribe got fireballed. He would have a policy of make sure they all knew it. You see the magic user, you shoot them full of arrows first. The fighter's scary, yes, but nowhere close to as scary as that match. So, I mean, various tactics, techniques, and procedures of the adventurers are going to intersect with the tactics, techniques, and procedures of the humanoids. And it depends on their experience base, how long they've been there, how much has been handed down by the tribal intelligentsia, because they keep the memories. And so when you said what would be the worst thing to fight, I thought Ogre Magi would be the worst.
Yeah.
Because they're 5-hit die, and they're super smart, and they have magical abilities and can turn invisible and fly. There's nothing worse than that.
Yeah.
But even an Ogre Magi in charge of a group of, bugbears, or a group in charge of, ruling some other lesser humanoids, he would be terrifying because he's very smart.
Well said.
And would think long and hard about running into people.
It actually kind of the whole thing about the experience with wizards. I actually timely saw a Twitter post that posited that one of the stupidest tropes there is in terms of playing D&D is the wizard wearing long flowing robes. It's like you are the physically the weakest person on the board. Why on earth would you announce yourself by wearing robes marking who you are?
I saw that actually as well. I think I saw that earlier today, and someone said, hey, I'd be dressed as a gentleman or, as some sort of, and then someone else said, yeah, but, that's kind of half the fun of being a wizard is you get to do that. So you're going to flex it like that. I don't know. Either way.
How are you wearing this a little jerkin carrying the torch? I'm just a lantern bearer.
Unless of course you have a magical robe, like a robe of the magi or something that you need to wear, and boom, now you're self-identified.
Well, yeah, but if you're wearing if you're a wizard wearing a robe of the Magi,
disguise yourself.
come at me, bro.
Yeah, come at me, bro. And I think the come at me, bro, is some of the, but probably not with that first level mage. He shouldn't be come at me, bro. All right, so this is now getting to the crux of what I wanted to talk about, which is. Now let's go to, and yes, Pat, you're correct. So the highest, levels in our context, sentient, sapience. When we're talking about humanoid, or it doesn't have to be even sapient. You can have very high level, non-sapient, intelligent creatures that would know these things. But there's a critical factor. So let's take bandits as an example. Let's take a highly intelligent group of bandits that are preparing to accost the party along the road. And they have a plan. And we're going to do this, and you're going to go out first, and then you're going to look for the gold, and you're going to hit the mage, and whatever that plan might look like. And I think one of the most intelligent, insightful, practical bits of advice that have ever been uttered were spoken by the ancient philosopher Mike Tyson when he said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And I think even when we're talking about monsters knowing what they're doing or bandits, this is such a critical thing to remember. In the chaos of battle, the term fog of war in D&D has come to mean sort of obscuring terrain, but it means much, much more than that. In combat, when the bullets are firing or the arrows are shooting, when the blades are swinging, when the blood is flying, when you've been hit in the face with a fireball, you don't think clearly. And that is such an interesting way to look at combat and how creatures react beyond just morale, even just adhering to strategy and the chaos of war that happens. Tim, you've lived this. Go ahead, talk about it.
I was going to say there's similarities in real life when something goes sideways suddenly. So we're talking about the guys on the road. Suddenly there's an ambush or something happens. Or vice versa, when there's an unexpected thing, whether it's a sniper or artillery or whatever it is, there's things we use called battle drills, where it's basically based on this stimuli, this is what you do. And so those get rehearsed over and over and over again, and they get rehearsed. So that way, when the stuff hits the fan, there is no thinking. If you have to sit there and go, what should I do? If you're sitting there thinking, forget about you, because under the stress, your heart rate shoots way up, and it inhibits your ability to think clearly. You're getting under this direct stress, your sensory input, you get tunnel vision, your hearing starts to go if you're super panicked and stressed. But if you don't even have to think about what to do because you have a battle drill, it gives you a focus on your mind of what to do, and you're not going to go into that downward spiral of stress and trying to figure out, your fine motor skills start going when you get all stressed like that. So having a battle drill, are they the type of group that would have battle drills where if they're like, hey, we're going to ambush this rich carriage, there's a magician in the carriage that just fireballed somebody, they should have a break contact drill. We're going to throw all our oil and ignite it, and then everyone's running all at the same time. And then that's a great plan. Or maybe they have a lesser match with fog cloud, and then they run, popping smoke, and actually getting out of there, and live to become fight another day. And that'd be a good enemy, because no enemy is just going to sit there and fight to the last man over your purse, if that's what they're.
Yeah, okay. I love this. I want to continue down this dialogue, but I do want to address some things in chat and come back to it. So I want to talk about what Mike said for a second, but I don't want to skip over. So Alexander said 100%. He had an instructor drop him, snapping his wrist, and he had to keep fighting injured. Definitely changes your philosophy on things. I would think by snapping wrist, if you mean actually like snapping, like bone snapping wrist, and you had to keep fighting, yeah, that would definitely change your vision on things.
Use your elbows.
Yeah, use your elbows, change tactics, use your knees, kick a lot. I might feign passing out. I don't know what I would do. So Mike said,
depends on how mad you got, John. Depends on how angry you got.
That's true. Yeah, yeah.
You might get real mad.
Well, yeah, sitting in a chair. That's kind of the point, right? Like we think of things one way intellectually in the calm, but when you're hit, whether it's the fear or the passion or the anger or in any of those scenarios, that fine muscle memory shuts down, right? When the amygdala fires, the parasympathetic nervous system is taking over, your cerebral cortex is shutting down, you are fight or flight mode, you change.
It shuts down unless you have conditioned it to be a reflex, and then it doesn't shut down.
So that I want to talk. So save that thought, because that's the crux of this first part of our two-part essence. Well, actually, it's 3 parts, because I didn't tell you this. My third part, I'm going to ask you and Rob. We're going to talk about advice for my book 3 characters for survival.
Okay, but I do want to go back to the carriage and the bandits, because I almost forgot this.
Well, yeah, okay. So I want you to, and that's the great context for Mike, because Mike was initially saying a highly intelligent group of bandits wouldn't attack a party, and I get the jets. Like if you've got,
I was thinking that too.
Yeah, if you got like 5, 6 level, clearly powerful guys coming out, and you're 3 bandits, you're not. They're way easier pickings than that, right?
But maybe the party are just guarding a caravan, and the caravan's wealthy.
Or maybe I've got 15 bandits, and there's 4 adventurers on the road, and I think they might have a decent purse. Now, still, if I'm gonna ambush the peasants, I know I'm gonna get the peasant bits and coins. If I look at those adventurers, they could be poor, but there's a chance they've got something worthwhile, right?
If I was a bandit wearing leather armor and I see dudes in chainmail with well-worn equipment and all their stuff's in order and their stuff's not shaking all around, exactly. I'm not attacking them.
Well, hey, wait. So this is let's talk about that. So you read this a lot in fantasy novels. Hang on here. This is that part of Adrian's track that it gets just a little bit too aggressive. I don't like it. Let me change that real quick.
Sorry.
So the idea, you read it in books sometimes, that a character can be looked at and they will know just by the way he carries himself or she carries themselves, the dress, the way their kit is in order, the way their head is on a swivel, the way their shoulders are squared, their environmental awareness, these sorts of cues that allow a veteran to separate. And I don't mean veteran in our current sense of like you served in the U.S. military veteran. I mean veteran in the sense that this person has seen a lot of combat. How easily cued is that in the eye of another veteran?
Well, they've actually taken criminals who robbed people and they showed them videos of people walking. It says, who would you choose to like stick up? And they would say, I'd rob that person. Oh, no, I wouldn't do that person. And then they would say, well, why? And they would ask him why every time. And there was a general, if you were not paying attention, looking at your phone, if you didn't seem like you were moving with a particular pace to be anywhere, if, if you were aware, you're walking with a purpose to go somewhere, like somebody's expecting you, or you're looking around and you're looking at the individuals, not staring at them and trying to incite something, but somebody who seemed aware and put together and they were going somewhere, they wouldn't, they're too ordered. They're too, they're focused on something. This person who has his earphones in and he's looking at his phone, you can surprise them. And surprise is, it adds to the shock. It adds to their confusion and everything. So, imagine someone's like this and all of a sudden they've been punched in the face. All right, react. I want initiative. I'm going to attack, in reality, they're also on the ground, maybe unconscious, certainly upset, and totally have no idea what's going on. So.
No, exactly. And that, I think, Rob, I've got several other thoughts on this topic, but I want to let you kind of chime in. Anything you wanted to say?
Well, I mean, and not only that, I mean, if a bandit's going to attack a party, going back to the whole wolf, they're not going to just randomly just run up to the party and try and take them on. They're going to figure out what works best for them. They'll, unless they're just complete idiots, they're going to have traps in place. There's going to be something to put it to their advantage because, if they're really interested in taking on something, they've got to make sure that they're giving themselves every opportunity because it's, otherwise they can't spend money if they're dead. So,
That's right.
They want to make sure that they even or actually make the odds in their favor every bit as much as they can.
Right, and the graveyards are filled with misjudgment. Right, that's sort of the key of it. Like, I think I got this, and I don't. And so they're going to tend to be very. This is, again, go back to the animal world. You're not going to very often see an animal taking on an animal that it knows it cannot bring down. There will be a high level of caution. Things like goring that can occur, even for some of the highest level predators. They're extremely cautious in those situations. If I look at the modern day example, if I'm wanting to beat somebody up and take their wallet or their purse, let's go to a current context. I might even choose to take on a group of 2 people. If I see they've got, bling, he's carrying a nice bag, she's got a, purse on with gems on it. But you know what I'm going to watch out for? If I see the guy with cauliflower ears,
don't do
you
that.
can bet I ain't getting anywhere near that dude. Nope. Because that tells me something just with that simple visual cue. I think in the D&D context, it's, there's a difference between the shiny armor that you just pulled off the shelf and you probably don't have fitted properly as your first level fighter, walking around, versus that guy that's got the well-oiled, well-used, chainmail that hangs comfortably on it. You can tell somebody who's new to horseback riding. They might be holding the reins, they're sitting in the saddle, but the gait that they're following with the horse and the way they're moving, you can tell they're new to it. The same thing is the way you hold a sword, the way you wear your armor, the way you move in that armor. People can tell if they are also veteran. If you're both first level, in that example, you probably don't know the difference, right?
But if you look ordered, it's less likely you're going to want to, try to do anything. And in the, how much money does adventurers have? Do they just want to set it up where it's just like, hey, there's a roadblock. Yeah, there's this little toll here. And if the party pushes too hard, let them go. You follow them and you steal a horse later and let them ransom their horse back. But a bandit's going to be, they want the money. They want to use the threat of violence, but they, if they have to start shooting, it kind of draws attention to themselves, and if they kill someone, that's one person they can't rob again later.
Well said. Hey, real quick, the Guest Junkies UK, thank you so much for the raid and the new followers, Mayor the Pirate and the Weirdo Lobster. We normally play D&D on this channel, but on Wednesday nights we have a talk show. We call it Loremaster's Arcanum, and we cover different topics. Tonight we're talking about better death. With this guy, the ever mysterious Tim, who is known for extreme combat tactics, real-world military service, and crazy crit tables. So right now, we're taking the opposite perspective of The Monsters Know What They're Doing, which is a very popular book and something it's a great, it's a good fundamental way to approach how your AI operates within your monsters. But this idea that everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth is what we're focusing on now. So the bandits, they've laid their trap. They've identified the target. They know, let's say in this case, it's a party of adventurers, but they're escorting a carriage that has high value target or wealthy target. They're going to go after that, and they know they're going to go after the mage first, and maybe 2 or 3 of them are going to tag team the most dangerous fighter, so they're all coming at him simultaneously. They've got, an archer in the woods. But when the engagement happens and the first thing is a lightning bolt that arcs out and strikes somebody in the face, or a fireball blossoms on the side, and the chaos erupts and the swords are ringing in the air and there's people screaming blood, even this idea that I'm going to run past, so I know I want to get to the mage, right? Get the mage first. Mage is dangerous. But I've got another guy running at me, screaming at the top of his lungs with a sword. My ability to be disciplined, ignore him, calculating my movement, can I get around him and get to that mage before he provokes an attack of opportunity on me? These are very challenging things to do in the bang, 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 fog of war, heat of war.
Right. And that's only assuming if they see the mage.
And I mean, the other part of it is, if I'm a group of bandits, I'm not showing all my pieces. It's going to be probably one of those things, maybe a Robin Hood style, something something on the road that blocks the way. One or two guys sitting on top of it, basically extracting a toll. And just to make the point, a few arrows come flying from wherever. Warning shots, but not say they know exactly how many people we have, and see if we can get the money without attacking, and not bring all of our forces to bear unless we absolutely have to. Keep them guessing.
Well said, Tim.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be running past the fighter. The bandits should not be running to fight anyone. They should be shooting people.
Yeah.
Because, one-on-one, that guy's really tough. But if 15 of us fire arrows at him, it's going to be a rough day for him. Or the mage. It would be much, much wiser just to shoot. That's why that's why we use missile weapons.
So let's dive.
It would be better to let them go and just steal their horse later and then ransom their horse back to them.
Right. So we agree. So some things we're all on the same page with. One, that highly intelligent enemies will choose their targets. And it's like anything else in life. You evaluate risk versus reward. Even your desire in current context to take a job, the level of difficulty of that job, you're going to balance that with the level of benefit you think you will get from that job. It is the same with, we make these decisions instantaneously as human beings. Everything that we do, we're evaluating the potential payoff versus the risk and effort involved with the action. So bandits are going to do that. Orcs are going to do that. And if they see the cauliflower ears as the example, then they may be much more hesitant to engage. Tim, you want to say something?
In the reverse dungeon, as the party, everybody involved is a goblin. The party is watching with their wolves from cover, and one of the goblins set oil on fire in a tree that was near a large group of the enemy goblins. And so it started a fire, and so they were in confusion. And then the main group of the party charged out on their wolves and came charging at them. So, obviously the fire is chaos, but of course they say they're going to, they have a boss. The boss says the wolves are coming. No one really knows what to do, so they just kind of form a loose line and they kind of stand by, because there may be smarter things to do, but given the situation and the amount of time, all they had to do was just kind of stand there with a spear and try to get ready to react to it, because that's all they could do. And didn't have a whole bunch of special maneuvers and ingenious things to do, because that wouldn't be true to form.
As I recall, a certain goblin read the situation correctly and got his butt out of there.
Yes, Robert was in the game and he ruined my TPK. Yes. he used his character's high wisdom to depart in an appropriate time. Several people departed 1 round too late.
I love the I'm all back on the site here. I love this quote from Joe Mangioldi. I've always said Dungeon Master is the whole world except for his player. As a result, I spent countless hours prepping for my home group. What Keith gets is that the monsters are DM's character, and his work has been super helpful in adding logic, flavor, and fun in my quest to slaughter my players' characters and laugh out the window as they cry in their cars afterwards. So how can we make this practical now? I love the idea that we can have both the intelligence of the monsters in coordination, and the monsters again can also be humanoid-based monsters, can be bandits, can be the evil characters, but then the chaos of war, the screaming, bloody murder, spells erupting, arrows flying, fear for your life, the heat, the passion, and let's assume for the moment that you're not highly trained. I want to come back to that topic. How can we implement that in a low threshold of effort, easy, lightweight way into our D&D game? So morale is one, right? So doing the morale checks, that's already a mechanic in the game. But that really comes down to running or not running. But how can you take sort of the reverse AI, the stupidity that occurs when you're scared or angry, and implement that in a very lightweight way into our game combat? And I'm open to suggestions. Chat, if you guys have ideas, I'm not coming to this with I have the answer. I'm saying I'm always looking as a DM to improve my craft. I've cited Castles and Crusades a couple of times because Rob was the one that really talked to me about the benefits of certain systems that they use in TLG. And while I love the crunchiness of my Pathfinder 1E and all the depth that, hundreds of feats and whatnot, that has benefits and it has a downside to it. In CNC, there's a real emphasis on not having rules and letting the DMs and the players adjudicate sort of in the micro moments, which I do instinctively in my games anyway. So with that in mind, how can you, chatters, Tim, Rob, how can I take this idea that you had a plan, your enemies had a plan, but they got punched in the mouth in some manner in that combat, and now maybe they're not running, but their strategy's breaking down. They're forgetting who they were supposed to attack first. They're tripping their own trap. They're doing something else stupid in that combat. How can I make that feel lightweight in my games? While you're thinking, I'll read a response we already have from the chat. So Joffrey said, if then go to mechanics, mind map on hand. So if they do this, then they don't move. I like that. So yeah, I think that's, so you could have contingency plans. So as a DM, this is what they're going to do, but if these things happen, then maybe this guy runs off to the side and does something different, or he triggers the trap, or he, instead of going after the mage, he just swings at the closest guy to him in the absolute fear of combat and the panic of the moment. I think those would be very easy things for you to do that don't require a mechanic. They don't require any sort of cumbersome bogging down of your game.
So, I mean, for me, it's a matter of when you're having an encounter. And this is one of the reasons I'm not crazy about random encounters, because you have to figure this out on the fly. I like knowing what my encounters are going to be. I like knowing when they're going to happen. And even a random encounter is something that I've already planned for. The only randomness may be when it actually happens. But going into that encounter, I want to know what victory looks like for the enemy. And at what point do they realize, I already know at what point the enemy is going to say, I'm done, and then it's a matter of how you end up role playing that. Is there a leader type that's trying to corral them and keep them together, whether by just strength of personality or by threatening to chop their heads off if he catches them running? It's
sure
one of those things, but I want to know ahead of time what that's going to look like once they get punched in the mouth. If I get to the point where I'm trying to figure that out on the fly, I've probably done my players and myself a disservice.
Okay, fair. Tim? So the question is lightweight, easy ways to implement these concepts without adding tables and rules and complexity.
First, strip away from your whole thinking that there has to be a hard fight. Let it be organic. So if the party has done something brilliant, and if I'm this guy in this situation, how jacked up would I be, or how messed up would it be, and go from there. So if the party does something great, let them turn the enemy into the metaphor of a baby harp seal and club it. Because that's what you want in a real fight. You don't want it equal. You want it to be a walkover. That's what you want, because your friends are dying if it's not a walkover. So it's okay if the party's good. And then the other side of the coin is, if they're stupid, you let them get rolled over and killed if they're dumb. So start out with that mindset, and then imagine in the micro, like if you're dealing with these two humanoids down the hall, they've heard a dwarf shout something and kill his friends. He's heard his friends gurgling and dying. All right, what are they going to do? What would you do? You'd probably wait right there and not go around the corner unless there's some reason they need to.
Yeah.
Just put yourself in that spot. And that we're not even talking about the terrain issue yet, just sort of like in that situation, what would they do? Is there a leader who kind of sees and gives orders and they go and react? So I like to do the organic. So I don't mind a wandering monster, wandering encounter. I don't assume they're automatically going to battle the party, because maybe they just, are are coming back, they're a little tired, and they bump into the party. They're in the woods hearing the party walking, and maybe they're scared too. Like, who's that? So maybe they just are both stalking each other because they're afraid of what it may be, so I like that.
Yeah. Okay. No, I like that too. So I want to come to this morale issue, and then Vic Danger has a really good point to bring us back to one of the segues that I wanted to come back to with you. So morale. I did not know there was not morale in 5e. So I do use morale. Although I don't use it religiously, but in certain situations I will use it. And Robert, you said you don't use the morale at all. I assume you mean sort of the explicit mechanic, but you're still.
Yeah, I don't use the mechanic. I mean, I use morale as a thing, but I know, I've already decided at what point they're going to lose it if if they're on the wrong side of this combat. If it gets to the point where it's going against them, they're going to skedaddle.
So that's a DM preference, right? I mean, I still like to have a die roll in there. And
there's nothing wrong. I mean, if it works for your game, there's nothing wrong with the die roll.
Yeah.
It's just not my way of going. I don't. That's the kind of thing where I don't leave that up to fate because the other part of it is, I've already have an idea of what I might do with the survivors, assuming the party doesn't go hunt them down. The mobs that run away may not be the last they see of them, and I don't want to leave that up to a die roll.
Well, so the reason I like it, and again, like you said, this is your mileage may vary. This is a DM preference. For me, to me, there's fun in the chaos and the randomness of the die element. So I know these monsters have a certain level of proneness to run or not run. And then I, even as a DM, get that wonderful surprise moment of, oh, they turn, they run. I'm still going to adjudicate. There are going to be times they're not going to run no matter what. There may be times the role play is so freaking good. I can think of there was an encounter in GHA Book 2 at the edge of the forest where the party encountered some bandits, and there was this sequence of events that included Rizia and some cool stuff that was, and they created such a frightening effect for these bandits who were already outclassed. I didn't even roll the die in that situation. I think I did have a roll, but it was the roll was so heavily slated, it was almost impossible for them not to run. They were going to most likely run, barring an exceptional roll. And that's a mechanic that I enjoy, but you don't need it. Robert.
I mean, if it works for you, it works for you. It's it's for me. It was not for me. I had an idea of at what point they were going to get out of there if things went bad. Or how, and it got to the point where a group that was on the verge of winning, but they still looked like they had a chance to finish off, might stay longer than they initially had planned.
Yeah.
And when I say they run, I don't it's not like I'm trying to get them to run before the party gets to do anything to them. There's going to be at least one round where things are going to go, and if the party manages to wipe them out, well, c'est la vie. But at the same time, if the party takes out 2/3 of them, like in round one, the rest of them are gonna be like, oh, nope. We're getting the hell out of here.
Yeah, and I think that goes to Chris Brungal said, hey, look, you're not doing morale checks in round one when the combat's going well. You're doing morale checks when it makes sense to do morale checks based on the circumstances, and it could be to Rob's point, how quickly is this unfolding? If there are 6 enemy combatants and 2 of them have died 5 or 6 rounds in, that's different than 6 enemy combatants and 2 of them died in round 1. And there's 6 seconds in and they're down 1/3 of their group. That's a different thing. But I want to come back to Vic Danger. I believe it was Vic Danger 21, I think was the username, if I saw it correctly. He really made the point that I wanted to bring up, which was, muscle memory was mentioned in chat. Training has been mentioned. But this idea of training, to resist the urge to act chaotically, I'm really not talking so much about running. I'm talking about thinking and responding in the cold, clinical sense of the logical, tactical mind. How much training does that take, Tim?
Oh, all right. I was going to say the training is collective training. right? So it's training as a group. So as a group, they all know what to do in certain stimulus. So it's stimulus response.
And by the way, for those that have joined us, if you missed it earlier, so some of these questions that I'm directing to Tim, he has active duty military service, and a lot of that colors the perspective that he has in his gaming. So I'm asking from that sense of his training, his experience in active duty.
So
what does that take? Go ahead.
So I have a little anecdotal story. So when I was a young second lieutenant in the infantry in Hawaii, someone had to defend the Pacific. Don't. We were deployed. It's for training, so this is all pre-war stuff. But basically, infantry does no job except train. It was a cohort unit, which means they all went to AI. Most of them went to AI through their initial entry training. And then they all showed up together. So they'd been working together for 2 years. I'm the new person. I've been there 30 days. We're doing a tactical exercise, all in training. We run into enemy contact, right? It's at night. We're maneuvering. And we run into enemy contact. And so everyone goes prone because there's machine guns are shooting. And I'm about to tell them what to do. But before I can even say a word, one squad has already gone online. They've already opened up in the direction of the enemy. The other squad is already moving around to do a flank on them, and they've already done it faster than I could ever even think to say it. And why? Because they've done it so many times. Repetition is.
So this is something a group of 6 intelligent bandits could probably get down in 8 to 10 hours of training together?
No.
I'm being facetious.
Yeah.
So give us context for the type and duration of training it takes.
They've been there together in the same unit for 2 years. So working together for 2 years. And so they've done iterations of training. So, you do training cycles and it's kind of rotating, but this is always reviewed. Battle drills are always one of those things you practice. You get a bunch of new people in, you're going to go and practice those. So you can think that, all right, I'm going to go out for a week in the field, and you're going to do some of these, react to sniper. There's certain things you react to,
Right.
Oh, you chance upon a bunker, how to clear a bunker. That's a battle drill. You automatically know someone's going to fire on it and suppress it. Somebody's going to maneuver up, throw a grenade. And there's certain things you're just going to kind of practice doing where as soon as the enemy was firing, this is his training, they automatically reacted to it and began doing something before I could even say, all right, squad, get online. Before I could even say that, they were already in execution mode.
I just heard your Call of Duty voice, didn't I?
I could shout so loud. My voice was so loud.
So Mike, no, a necromantic DM. I was not assuming that bandits are training. I was being somewhat facetious in the question.
But they could be.
They could be. What I'm saying is, if you are extending this to how likely is any group to hold to a set of preset tactics in the chaos of an actual high-level stress combat scenario, I'm just sort of making that point. Go ahead, Rob.
I like the idea. No. Oh, go ahead, Robert.
I was going to say, the one thing I was going to say was, they might have, they could have one thing that they're really good at. They be a one-trick pony. It's a set of tactics that has worked over and over for them because they've chosen their targets well. But the question becomes, what happens when it stops working?
Right.
There's where the battle-trained, hardened group is going to be able to adjust on the fly, where the one-trick pony is, okay, we're in trouble.
They also should be really good at break contact. That should be one of their top performing things is break contact when something goes sideways, where they know how to they know how to run away effectively. That's very important for those guys. That's important for anybody. If you're like, we got to get out of here now, you need to have a way of doing it that doesn't just turn into a rout. Because once
Manda, stop trying to deflect it. You know who he meant, and you are amazing, Manda. And no, you cannot take the poster away from me. I have it locally here on my drive. But in all seriousness, we're excited. Everyone's excited. Knowing their limitations. That's right, Patrick. So the point I was trying to drive home there is, hours and hours and hours and hours and days and days and days and days of training. That's not probably what's happening in most D&D scenarios with group combats. And so having fun with it as a DM, enjoy it. Let that goblin run off and do something absolutely crazy because he panics in the moment. Let that enemy fighter who thought he was going to run at the wizard but sees your fighter, and also your players. You might see, even last night in Greyhawk Awakening, there was a scene where one of the PCs was gripped by a large hand and was being crushed. The other player, huge in this case, enlarged by spell, swings a two-handed sword and misses. Well, in the chaos of that combat, that's very much like the rule set that you also used, Tim, where you're firing into combat with a missile weapon. Yeah. If you got somebody gripped there and you're swinging and you miss, there's a good chance you're going to hit that person.
Very good chance.
And the more chaotic the combat is, the more likely that is. And those, again, I want to keep driving this home, are things you don't need tables for. You don't need extensive sets of rules. You don't have to bog down your game and say, let me go to page 347 of my advanced combat manual and consult. That is something for you as a DM in fairness, in equity, and in good judgment to introduce whatever the mechanic is you want to use to make it make sense and to make the combat feel more flavorful.
I think it's a great idea to decide what their drills are, how they react to certain stimuli, and then when something similar to the stimuli happens, they react to it that way, even if the party has them out of position, or even if you should be able to do that. So if the party positions themselves well, it defeats their action, because it's just competing tactics, techniques, and procedures that are just intersecting and running into each other, and that just makes it more fun and different.
That's right. Okay. So I think we've taken that topic to its logical conclusion for the moment. I have some other ones I want to talk about, but Robert, I'm going to give you the last word. Anything else on that you wanted to discuss?
No, I think we've covered that one pretty well. I have some thoughts, but I think it may, what I want to say might fall into some of the other topics a little better.
Okay. All right. So let's move to this concept. Go ahead, Tim.
I was going to say, for movies and training, I love the Seven Samurai, the original black and white. You know, they get the 7 veterans to get this farming village to fend off these brigands that are coming and raiding them, and they're just farmers, and so they gotta try to whip them up and collectively use them for what they can do, you know, as a group without a lot of training. So that's a pretty good movie. I love that movie.
That's credited for a heavy influence on a lot of films, including Star Wars. So you have, I like Joffrey's comment in the chat. He had some military guys over, and one of them, this is my sword. There are many swords, but this one is mine.
That's right.
Okay, let's move.
My military friends are really effective in a lot of ways.
Hold my beer one time. Frost Giant Jarl, my players threw multiple fireballs in a glacier and were pissed at me for creating mist and fog. No, you did it exactly right, my friend. That is good DMing. All right, so let's talk terrain. And let's just list a few types of either terrain, or maybe not necessarily terrain, but circumstantial environmental factors that can and should affect combat. Let's just throw some things out. So obviously we've got elevation, high and low ground, the most common. What else?
Mud.
So the quality of terrain, that can include mud, can include broken ground, bits of fallen mortar, any kind of tough terrain. What else?
Well, there's elevation in hand-to-hand, and there's elevation in missile
weapon. Yeah, let's talk about both of those. Darkness, yeah, Pat. So obscurity, darkness, your ability to various levels of vision in lower light situations. Go ahead, Tim.
Restricted terrain, like I'll go back to the reverse dungeon, where the little humanoids have little teeny tunnels, and they put murder holes in the top facing into where their domain is. So if some big dude in a helmet who can hardly see anything is creeping along, his back goes right underneath their murder hole, so they can shoot him full of arrows, they can stab him, they can dump oil on him and set him on fire, and there's nothing he can do. He's in this little confined space. He can't even see up because he's wearing his helmet.
Yeah.
His shield is he's stuck there, so they're just going to shoot him, and then he's going to run, and they have a pit trap on the other end, so he falls right into the pit trap. So
do that with castles as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll talk about castles
terrain,
also
small
today.
doors.
We got a lot more to get through in the 30 minutes or so we have left. But so in the chat, we've got darkness, snow, sand, different sort of ice. Oh, ice is a big one. Forest density, that kind of goes to what you're talking about, constriction, right? So if I'm in close quarters, there are ice I will see sometimes in games, and to me, this should be a non-negotiable. This to me is not non-negotiable. This to me is a common sense rule a DM should enforce. If I am in a 5-foot wide passageway, I should not have someone swinging a two-handed sword in that 5-foot wide passageway with a 7-foot tall ceiling. It just is physically impossible.
But if he half swords it, he actually could stab with it.
Well, yeah, or I mean, you can sort of do this, but that's again a very limited. But you'll see games sometimes where someone is overhand arc swinging in a 5-foot wide, 7-foot tall passageway. That's just not happening. Go ahead.
I mean, one of the reasons that went away is because as the editions went on, they started homogenizing as far as damage types, and you got away from having the appropriate weapon for the type of mob you were fighting. I mean, you still saw it a little bit with undead, but everything else suddenly was whatever weapon you've got. The most we may want is it have a +1 or be magical of some sort. And, it got to the point where people stopped worrying about having the right weapons. They might have one regular weapon, a dagger, and a some kind of crossbow or bow if they were able to. That was about it. You didn't see them having like 4 different weapons.
Agreed. All right, so let's, and by the way, Vic Danger, I like some of the comments in chat tonight. Thank you for that. Bear traps in the tiny dungeon also. Yes, Pat. So he said here, the 1974 Three Musketeers and on the 4 had great sword fights in challenging terrain.
Best
Tim?
one. That's a great one. That's the best one.
I'm not familiar with that. I'll have to go back and watch that. Yeah, that's kind of cool.
Michael York is D'Artagnan in that.
Oh, okay. All right. Very cool. So let's start with elevation. I thought this is what got my juices flowing on this, because we all know fighting from higher ground is advantageous. There are a number of reasons for that. Let's just dive into a few, but let me start with one of my most fun topics. There are 2 high-level, really important concepts in being on higher ground, beyond just, you got others like visibility. That's a huge one. You can see further, particularly if it's with a missile weapon. But if I'm in melee combat one-on-one, I see 2 major factors that are improving. One, I have the benefit of gravity in the downward force of my swing. This is actually something I wanted to calculate using some physics equations to figure out what the likely increased percentage of force I generate based on grade and distance and weight of weapon. I'm going to show you what that looks like in a second using my good friend ChatGPT.
But I did not approve the weapon weight.
He said my weapon's a pound too heavy. But anyway, so, but then also even beyond that, let's take a look at that example. And of course, your mileage may vary. None of this is exact, but I thought this was a lot of fun. So I started with my question with ChatGPT. How could I calculate the additional force in the swing of a sword from higher ground on approximately a 30% grade versus flat ground? And it gives me the calculation, F equals m times g times sine or theta, for where m is the mass of the object, g is the acceleration of gravity. It's assuming standard weight and swing size. And I said I asked to express that as a percentage in force. And it gives me its initial percentage but I said, now assume it's a 4-pound blade. That's what Tim said was a little too heavy. And the combatants are 6 feet tall, and I've got them 3 feet apart on a 30% grade. In the calculation here, it's indicating its estimate is about 30.02% increase in force with the gravitational pull in my favor swinging down versus on flat ground. That's now whether that's exact or I use different parameters, I got some different results. And obviously, if you're swinging a huge sword, the higher the grade, but there is no question. Just think, if I'm swinging a 30% grade, that's a decent grade, right? And a
treadmill only gives you 15.
Yeah, a 30% is a pretty hefty grade. So I'm going up a fairly steep hill. I'm not 45. Right, I'm not 45, but I'm on a pretty good grade here. This might be equivalent also to being up 3 steps on a flight of stairs. That would be very equivalent to about a 30%. Go ahead, Rob.
By the way, we need to get back to the staircase. And when you're done, we'll get back to the staircase example because there's an important one.
Are you talking about the twist of the staircases in the tower? Yeah, I love that one.
Yes.
So we'll come back to that in a second. But now let's assume straight stairs. If I'm 3 stairs up, I probably got a good 30%. That's not an uncommon. It's fairly aggressive, but not uncommon. So then if I've got a 30% greater force swinging down, I might assume something similar in decrement of force swinging up. That's just the gravitational pull on arm and 4-pound blade. Go ahead.
If they're swinging, like if they're both swinging at each other's head, one person is swinging down at the head, the other person swinging up at the head. So that's where that difference is. If one person's swinging at the, down at somebody's head, and the other person swinging down at your foot, they're probably going to both have similar outcomes as advantage. Just
Yeah,
I'd like to point out that's exactly what I told him.
Yeah. Huh? What's that? So let's dive into this topic. This is fun. The chat's blowing up. I love this. So yes, Deep Thoughts by Blue Box, or I want to play Rolemaster. I actually did like Rolemaster a lot. But you've got several factors here. I've only talked about the gravitational force. What I haven't even addressed is the pull, where that power is coming from, and the muscles being engaged. So when you swing down, you're getting a lot more of the lat, a lot more of the tricep, bigger muscle groups. When you're swinging up, there's a lot more of the bicep engaged, smaller muscle groups. So not just the gravitational pull, the actual muscles being engaged. And I'm not trying to translate this into a mechanic. No, I'm not trying to play Rolemaster. These are just fun topics to think about, and they could impact something that you would apply in your game. I'll let you guys respond.
I believe that the evidence is very supportive, that there are real reasons why that height advantage is useful, and that evidence is every single fortification ever created.
Right. But those are extreme examples.
Stone Age, from hill forts to, I remember walking up a hill fort. It had been a Roman hill fort at one point in time. At near the end of the Roman Empire, the hill was still there. It was in England. And it was like this, going up this hill. Brutal. And I'm not wearing anything. I'm not wearing armor. I was wearing just clothes. I was young and healthy. And, I was in college. So I was like, it was brutal just walking up that. I was just like.
Just go up the Palatine Hill in Rome, where the emperor's palaces were. That hill's steep enough,
Well, that's a whole other topic. Like, this is something I was talking about with Tim. Like, imagine running up that hill to engage the enemy, getting to the top of that hill after running up in armor, you crest it, you come over, and there's the enemy, or right at the top after you've fought your way up, or you're scaling those walls. How many times do we see in movies people going up the ladders or the grappling hooks, scaling the walls? They hit the top of the wall, and they're fresh, barely out of breath, swinging that sword with just as much fervor as that defender who was waiting there for them, not moving. Utterly ridiculous, right? The high ground has many, but I'm just talking specifically two people, same size, same weight, same height, standing on a grade. What is happening in the actual physics of their combat? So let's take a look at this. So the different muscles engaged. Let's see what we have here. On a 30% slope would engage different muscles and require different initiations of force. On the downward slope, the force of gravity would be acting in the same direction. On the upward slope, of course, it would be acting in the opposite direction. So you're going to overshoot your target in situations. And that technique of the sword down could include the chest, shoulders, back, and arms. And there are other factors that could be engaged. It was mentioned in chat, if you're on the lower, you're going to have to change your fighting style because you're defending your knees, your thighs. Perhaps you're growing. You're working to protect different areas. But I think even your head and shoulders, your neck become easier targets if I'm swinging down at you versus you're swinging up at me and you're catching legs, hips, abdomen. Still hurts, but different.
Right. Well, this is again where you bring in, and this is one of the areas where first edition actually really shined, because weapon speeds and weapon sizes and value against certain targets were a thing, because
they are in Pathfinder 1E and 3.5 as well.
Oh, cool. But like if you're going up the hill, I'm not going to be looking to do the big overhand swing. First of all, I'm not entirely sure I'm doing the big overhand swing. I'm probably going to if I have a Warhammer or even I'm going after your knees. Because you're not going very far when your knees are crossed, or something that I can stab you in the groin.
Right. Right.
The in game systems that have an area location per hit, like Warhammer, you can modify the roll to reflect hitting lower, having a tendency to hit lower when you're at height discrepancies and things like that. But I think just assigning a penalty when you're attacking uphill is a good idea, because it is so much harder. And then add a fatigue penalty in there. How far did you have to charge up that hill? How much weight are you carrying? Has anyone actually thrown 40 pounds of weight on? Just put on two 20-pound weight vests and go for a jog around the block. Check with the doctor first and see how that goes. Or just see what that's like.
Yeah, I mean, the fatigue is probably the quickest way to add something to it without getting into major arguments. Basically, you run up that hill, you're going to be suffering.
Yeah.
And it's going to be something that's not going to be just one round. It's going to be multiple rounds of you basically having penalty.
The only hope is you have so many of you going up the hill slowly with shields and all that, protecting as best you can, and then hopefully you outnumber them so much they can't mass at one point, because if you mass at a point, they can mass it with the height advantage and stop you. If you force them to have to displace around the whole entirety of the height, that's the advantage. But it's terrible. I mean,
all right, so sorry, go ahead. Yeah. I want to jump in. The chat is, you guys are especially on fire tonight, chat. I'm enjoying the comments. You're always good, Mad Chatters, but you're really good tonight. Several comments in here. So there was, I wanted to, it was, who said it here? It was Rob. A comment was made, I think it was Fraley, that said, when you made the comment, Rob, about swinging for the knees and then pointing at the growing, that he was going to keep an eye on you at Blue Box Con.
He's running the Sunday game that I'm playing in.
So let's see. NBL Illustration said, as an old handball goalie, one of the main things we talked about was that the reaction when raising your arms takes almost twice as long compared to the reaction of lowering your arms, and that's without any load. What a fantastic, that is exactly, that is, if you just look, yeah, you bet, Jay, you just think about what you're engaging here, your front delt, it's not your strongest muscle. It's just not. I don't care who you are, you can work it out. Versus this, you're pulling that lat. That's a huge muscle on the side of your body. So much more force. And
your core, if you're doing it right, your whole core is involved in pulling it down as well. So you are...
Yeah, so to me...
You're getting the whole thing in there.
So how do you do this in D&D? To me, this is very simple. Depending on the grade, I may just look at my party and say, hey, right now you've got a +2 to hit and a +3 to damage. Or you've got a -1 to hit and a -2 to damage. And you can do it fairly. And you may not be exactly right. But guess what? You'll be closer to right than just keeping everything the same and even, because there's no way that is accurate. And it can be a mechanic that's fun, and it makes the players think. Now high ground and terrain start meaning things. Battle gets to be more fun instead of just standing around, okay, I'm going to attack, I'm going to roll my d20. Now I'm thinking about environment, I'm thinking about angles, I'm thinking about other sorts of cover items that really make the combat not just more challenging, more freaking fun.
Yeah.
Rob?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's one of those things. But then it becomes a matter of like, all right, well, is it just the first attack once you've engaged? Because you get into that weird area. It's like, okay, well, how long does this stick? Which is kind of why I like if they run up the hill, they're going to be suffering. Yeah, just pure and because that gives me the better without having to worry about, well, okay, are they now even with each other? Have they managed to move around?
Why is that? But why is that a problem, Rob? We do the same thing with cover. Or take your example. If I'm in a tower. So because we didn't get to come to this. So if I'm going up the steps in a tower, what was the point you were going to make, Rob, about how those are designed?
Well, I mean, the interesting thing about towers is the tower steps were designed to give the advantage to the defenders who would be on top. So, basically they'd have the better angle for swinging their swords or swinging their weapons, and with the shield placement.
They can hide behind the central pillar and be using their right arm to And
the stairs will wind So that if you're coming down, the inside, the wall will be to your left shoulder, and the open area will be to your right shoulder. So which the predominance of them would have been right-handed. So a right-handed person can swing a blade without hitting that wall, whereas the person coming up, their right hand is against that wall.
And some of them, the wall is this much. It's actually the stairs are pivoting around a column this wide. Just
exactly. So my point would be, in that example, the penalty that person's going to suffer is as long as they're in that situation. If I'm behind cover, I'm going to get that 50% cover as long as I'm behind that cover. If I've got the example of elevation, I'm going to take that penalty or get that benefit as long as that maintains. If at some point, and again, you don't be overly like, oh no, you're still at a 6% grade. No, I mean, just be smart, be lightweight about it. And if the player does something or the enemy does something to counteract it and it's reasonable, then get rid of it. Don't make it cumbersome, but it should be persistent as long as that advantage or disadvantage still exists. Yes? No?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So in the chat, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tim.
Play it by ear and do it organically rather than mechanically.
Balance. That's it. Balance organically. I've said it probably 5 times now. I'm going to say it again. I don't want, if you watch Blue Box Combat, we try to keep it moving, even in complex combats. It's supposed to be engaging and fun. It's not a war game, but you do want an element of realism and variety to it, and so that's fun. Okay, so very true. Lots of, yep. Obi-Wan won from the low ground every time. He cut Darth Maul in half coming up from down below, and he taunted Anakin about jumping over him so he could take his legs out.
And you could use that with your lightsaber every day.
Exactly, because when the lightsaber touches, you don't need any force behind it. You don't have very much weight behind it. And if I just go like this with my lightsaber, you're going down just as hard as if I was swinging it with all my force. So that is a very, very, keep math away from Jenny. Oh, absolutely. You have to keep math away from Jenny. There is no doubt about that. All right. So my last topic of the night, and thank you again, chatters, is I want some practical advice from the two of you, but especially from you, Tim, not only as our guest, but as someone who has constantly been screaming in my chat, in my games. Give advice to my players as we are preparing to launch into Book 3, Practical Tips for Survival in the Sea of Dust, which is, in my version of Greyhawk, the Sea of Dark Sun. It is the Sea of Dust. And by the way, for you lore grognards, I think you're going to like it. I have talked through this. I've thought through it with some of the lead thinkers of modern day Greyhawkery. I think it's a really fun concept. It's not just sticking Athos in the Sea of Dust. There's a reason for it. It's connected inside the. I think it's going to be fun. How can they better survive in that hostile land?
Well, I have never played Dark Sun. I've read some of the stuff and been like, ooh, that looks... There's something like horrifically Mad Maxian about it, It's like, ooh, that's terrible, just from the environment. So I have one thing I've always wanted to tell the players. Get a missile weapon, and all of you should use them before you close and then remove opportunities from killing the enemy before you get criticaled by him. Right? Because every missile is an opportunity for a crit. So maximize it by shooting your opponents as often as possible. Then pre-decide how you're going to close. So that way, all right, we're going to shoot one round, then we're going to do spells, or you do a spell that helps us, a bless spell, and then we charge. So everyone kind of knows, because what happens is it usually turns into a confused. It looks like people who haven't trained or thought it out at all, and it ends up. That's usually what gets them in trouble, I think. Whenever there's been something going sideways.
Okay, that's a great, yes, absolutely. That's a great one. And I think sometimes there's a natural way to shy away from missile weapons because they tend to do so little damage. Comparatively speaking, you don't get strength bonuses on them. So if that crossbow does a D6, you're going to get that D6. But still, this is where I think the critical hit element
poison it. It's Dark Sun.
Yeah, it could be poisoned. But even just the critical hit piece, this to me is why critical hits are so important to your ecosystem. Because if I hit you with a crossbow bolt, there are certain parts of your body that if it hits, it is going to devastate you. And that has to be part of your game for it to have even a semblance of the fun and reality of actual combat. So if you are, to your point, if with a nat 20, I have a chance to crit, so I confirm that crit. Now I hit tables. Those tables at least give me the chance to put that crossbow bolt through your cheek, to put it in your neck, to put it in your groin, to put it in a really critical place where it's not just double damage. It's something that would be as impactful as taking a bolt to that area would be in game. That makes the missile weapon more effective.
Yeah, that was the general. I always feel like they should be shooting things before closing with them. They seem to close too often. Now I'm going way back to some of the early fights, and that's always what came to mind. Is like, shoot them. People use missile weapons today for most of their work.
Yeah,
they're different missile weapons, but no one is choosing to they use missile weapons. So use that, and then also they may have to, and it may be, I don't know how hard it will be with the new crew. They need to not be sentimental about people they meet or little kids or whatever. It's Dark Sun, it's if it's still the same version of it that I kind of read and looked into, you can't be, oh, this little kid needs our help. No.
What? Depends.
No, it's like, little kid, does that little kid have some water? If we drain him and distill it, can we get some water from his tissues? It's Dark Sun. You gotta look out.
There are still good aligned creatures in Dark Sun, Tim. So I like Greg said, a grim world of perilous adventure. That's right. Well, hey, you're talking about missile weapons. This is in my Greyhawk Awakening team channel as I'm prepping them for this world. Here's an example of a missile weapon that goes beyond poison. The Siltstalker Elven tribe has a particularly unpleasant type of arrow they use with as much purpose to terrify as to incapacitate. They carefully attach many slender barbs to the tip of an arrow, forming a hollow conical cage at the arrow's point. These barbs are usually thorns from a Jarok plant or specifically carved bone. Inside the cage is placed a particularly nasty beetle known as the Sakya. This beetle is only the size of a child's small pebble, but has a voracious appetite for flesh. Between making and usage, these arrows are generally stored point down in special quivers that hold some meat scraps for the beetles to feed upon. Before attacks, these beetles are starved for a 24-hour period, and then these arrows are fired. The cages are constructed to hit, barb, and break, releasing the beetle to feed inside the body of the victim. That is an example of the kind of stuff you're going to find in Dark Sun.
That's gross. But also, it should have terrible range. It should have a big penalty to hit.
It does. Yeah.
It should have, if they have a shield,
Tim.
it should.
It's all there. They've got that. They've got decrements to the attack, the cost of the arrow, the distance that it can travel. That is all built into it. Yeah. It's the same idea.
I just thought dipping the arrow into poop would be bad enough. But go ahead and make some sort of parasite.
Yeah, if you watch, was it 1883?
1889.
1889. Yeah, 1889.
Just thinking the same thing.
She was such a great actress too. Man, she was awesome, and she takes that through the liver, and the arrow had been coated in excrement, and it's basically a death sentence. All right, but I'm serious about this. Some other basic tactic things, because in my games, I do have players that are brand new. Becca, this is the first time she's ever played D&D. She's brand new to it. Vivi has played a lot, but she's not like a super aggressive tactical thinker. She's a fantastic role player. She's funny. She's got all the character elements to it. Rory can be very tactical, but Rory also, and I've talked about it, Rory will get very tunnel visioned at times. And so we've had situations where the party spends an hour thinking about how to get across a bridge, but then in another scenario will charge blindly into danger. So what are some practical grognard old school roleplay tips that you guys can share with them as they're getting ready for this extremely dangerous venture into the Sea of Dark Dust?
So, I mean, one of the things is, and it's a little problematic because a lot of times in your games, the combat, they don't get a chance to plan the combat. It normally comes upon them. But wherever possible, make sure that you're using the terrain to your advantage. Having a plan as to knowing why you're sending somebody first. If say you're crossing a bridge or something, know exactly why you're doing what you're doing, not just somebody volunteers to be the first one over. Making sure that you're doing what you can to cover for whoever is going over, and what happens if that first person does get attacked.
Yep.
And also, you're in a world where resources are very, very scarce. So, basically, if you're coming across a group that has mounts and you're in an area where there's not a hell of a lot of water, going after their mounts is fair game, because if you want to try to take them for your own, finding a way to free them from their mounts, but otherwise take them down and have them stranded.
Yeah, well said. The chat's blowing up on this one. Lots of good advice here. So the beetle should die hard on impact. Well, that's actually the purpose of the cage, William. So the cage is to protect the beetle as it strikes and inserts. But I could see, I think there are ways. This should not be just like a magic thing. Every time you fire it, it hits and it puts the beetle there. This has got to have, it's like people who attach a regular rope to the end of an arrow or a crossbow and think that, 50 feet of rope is, no. So,
50 feet of rope will get you dead arrow 10 feet.
Dead arrow 10 feet down, exactly. Walk behind Rory, sever the head, present it to, yeah, that's fair. Stay behind the biggest person when walking in line, and Manda said yes, that's what she and Ashlyn plan on doing. You're exactly right. Ashlyn has told me in our back and forth discords, her character has, I think, an 8 or a 9 strength, and she plans on using the half giant and the blooded character to carry all their heavy stuff for them and be in the front of the party.
Yeah.
So one of the things, go ahead, Tim.
I was going to say, assigning roles, your fire support and backup fighter. I'm going to be the primary fighter. You look for buffing and blesses and healing and things that accentuate our ability, as well as firepower. And then you set those roles up so they don't, not doing battle drills, but they know when something happens, they know their role. They also know we're going to shoot once or twice, then we're going to close. So then that way everyone has a chance to do all that missile stuff before they end up shooting their own party or blowing their own party up.
Yeah, and I think, in summary, I don't expect the players to be so much smarter than their characters actually would be. They're still role-playing the characters, right? So if your character has a 7 wisdom, role play that 7 wisdom, that's different. But when I see like a 7th level character that's got a high intelligence, a high wisdom, do your best to play that character to that. That is what the role play is about. And
I give them more. I give that person more info sometimes too.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the other important things, and this especially in a Dark Sun type environment, the importance of a spellcaster who knows how to use their non-damage dealing spells. One of the things that 4E for all the mockery gets, the tactical thing and the concept of the different roles and the controller role, who's the person who's basically helping decide how the combat plays out by doing what they need to do to tilt things in their favor, whether it be handing out the blessings and such, or using things like darkness, fog, or whatever. You can, if you got that person who's really good at using those spells to basically keep things going in your favor, that's worth more than any magic missile is going to do.
Yeah, obscuring the vision of, if you're being shot at, obscuring their vision. They're shooting blind. I mean, I know in D&D it was -4. It should be way worse than that.
Yeah, agreed.
It's very difficult to shoot where it's perfectly blind. And that's a great idea. I mean, that's a very good point.
Yeah, well said. All great. All right, so we're gonna get ready to raid here, but so Manda, I just looked at your stat block. You sent it to me in Discord. I don't think you use the right system. So I have a fairly generous to the players system.
It's all 18s?
No. She's got nothing above a 14 on 3 sets of stat blocks.
It's fine.
No, it's not fine in this game. It's not fine. So you're supposed to use 4d6, drop the lowest roll on those stats, not just 3d6. Were you just rolling? You did 4d6 with those stats? Are you kidding me?
John, it's a challenge. Don't diminish her.
Amanda, go ahead and please begin making your second character now as well. They are bad, guys.
Don't
They
let
are
him scare
really
you.
bad. They're awful. So here I'll read you Amanda's stats here. So set 1, 12, 14, 7, 13, 12, 12. Set 2, 10, 11, 11, 13, 13, 11. Set 3, 13, 12, 12, 7, 12, 8.
Take the first one.
I know, you would take the first one. Woo-wee. That's 46 is not supposed to present that kind of stack. All right, so as we get ready to raid into our good friend Lord Gazumba, I want to remind everyone we'll be back on Sunday with Tears of Erd. If you're a fan of Greyhawk Awakening or you're in on LMA but you've not caught our Sunday shows, do yourself a favor. The role play is fantastic. These players are amazing. Rachel, Cameron, Jenny, Thomas, a fantastic group. Thank you to Kurt, who was a guest appearer for us last week as we were down a player. Kurt crushed it. So much fun as a role player. You're going to see more and more of Kurt here on Blue Box, and he also lives just a few minutes away from me. And then I am thinking about there may be another announcement for April. There may be something very interesting we're going to do on Blue Box in April. I want to talk to Rob and a couple of my admins about this, but I've got an idea that's running around in my head. All the LMAs are going to rock. We got Fraley next Wednesday with 3D printing. He'll be in the Blue Box studio printing live. We got some fun stuff we're going to do then. The 22nd, of course, we have the Throw Dice Like a Girl event. 6 amazing women telling their stories, including the biases that they face, some implicit, some overt. The very, in some cases, inappropriate behavior that they have seen, their responses to it, and what others face inside the gaming community. That includes painting, video gaming, role play, and cosplay. But then the triumphs, the things that they bring to the table, what they've seen, their greater moments, the good things that they've enjoyed. It's going to be a really fun 2-hour conversation. The title and the topics all decided by the women in the stream, and that will be on the 22nd. Then the 29th, we're going to be joined by Demon Gun and Don, Mad Wizard of Tales Tavern. We're going to be talking about how to get your Tailspire stuff up and running lickety-split with crazy cool environments in seconds for free. I had Kurt in my gaming room a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about it. He had a copy of Tailspire. He never really used it because he thought the building was complex. I showed him Tales Tavern. That's Don's website. And his jaw hit the floor, and then he said, "How much?" And I said, "Free." And his jaw went through the floor. And so we're going to show you on the 29th simple tips and tricks to get stuff up and running in seconds. For all those assets are free, all the boards are free, supported by the community. And then on the 5th, we've got our budget build battle with Ashlyn. We're going to build a tavern together. That's going to be a special 2-hour show. There'll be prizes. It's going to be a blast. So a lot of cool stuff happening here on Blue Box. And then, of course, the big one, May 2nd, the Sea of Dark Sun. Greyhawk Awakening, Book 3, as the threads of this complex tapestry are coming together, and all of these pieces are starting to make sense. Book 3 is going to be one you are not going to want to miss. As we get ready to close tonight, Rob, I'm going to give you the honor of asking the question.
So, if you've been enjoying the Blue Box content you've been seeing tonight and on our other streams, but you've not yet followed, or you've been a follower of some considerable time, but not yet subscribed, or you have subscribed, but oh my gosh, your subscription has failed to resubscribe.
No!
We here at Blue Box have one question for you.
What are you doing? Come on, give us a follow,
give us a sub.
We are marching toward 2,500. We just crested 2,000 followers like 2.5 months ago. So if you think about it, we've picked up 15% of our followers in the last 2.5 months. The growth is accelerating. I want to say thank you to all of you out there in Mad Chatterland. Thank you for all the participation. You're being broke. Hey, no worries. Although, note, if you do have an Amazon Prime subscription, that comes with 1 free Twitch sub. If you go onto your Amazon account, if you have that, you can do that, and you can sub here. And then, yes, Fraley mentioned we will have a 3D print giveaway. Oh my gosh, Blue Box Con, it is going to be off the hook this year. We have so many fun things planned, giveaways planned, events, the gaming tables, better than ever. We have a group event we're doing on that Saturday with Chandler running there. Everyone can participate participate in the same game. It's going to be a blast. And if you weren't able to get in before we had to close the ticket sales, I apologize. That's why I'm trying not to talk about it too much, because I know there were people that couldn't come this year, and I don't want you to feel bad about it. But I do want those who are able to come to be excited, and we will stream a lot of the content. So even if you're at home, you'll be able to be with us virtually for much of it. And also, there's next year, and I'm quite confident we're going to have another con next year. When I first did this, Rob, we talked about this. I thought I might do it one year, and now it's getting bigger and bigger and better every year. And I am super excited about Blue Box Con coming up in May.
And new people will be coming. We get new, and we have some people who've been to all three. Some have made, or will be there at all three. Some who've be there for the first time, and it's amazing to watch.
That's right. And so if you got your first 2 pins from the first 2 years, you had the Blue Box pin, and then you got your Mad Chatter pin last year. This year we have a super cool pin, and you can stack these and add them if you have been in attendance to previous cons and kind of flex your con attendance.
You can wear your flare.
Yeah, I have no idea where my pin from the first year is, or second year, one of the two.
Shame upon thee, Rob. Shame.
No one told me we were going to be doing this every year.
Somebody probably stole it.
Somebody stole it. Yeah, say they stole it. All right, guys. By the way, we're going to raid now.
Another important date coming up.
Yes.
Another important date coming up. April 7th we are going to be celebrating the 2-year anniversary of Friday Night Crusades.
Friday Night Crusades, 2 years.
2 years.
That's incredible. We're coming up on 4 years for Blue Box. I can't believe it. That's going to be in August, I think. It feels like it just started yesterday. But anyway, thank you, everyone, for joining us. We love you, Mad Chatters. We have so much fun stuff coming up for you. Stay close to the channel. Join our Discord. Follow us on Instagram. You get all the announcements. Thank you again tonight to Tim. We really appreciate you being with us. Thank you, Rob, as always. I really enjoyed the conversation tonight. I thought it was a fun topic and really interesting things for you to hopefully add lightweight fun wrinkles to your combat in your games. With that said, Blue Box signing out. Say hi to Lord Gazumba for us, raid in with us, and everybody have a great night. Bye-bye.
And we're out.